The career of American composer Marga Richter, born October 21, 1926, spanned most of the 20th century. She worked with dancers, recorded with MGM, dabbled in the 12-tone technique, though she disliked it, and developed a neo-romantic, or as she once called it, a transcendental expressionist style. When she graduated in 1951 from the Juilliard School of Music with a master's degree in composition, it was the highest degree offered in composition, and she was the first female to do so. Richter composed over 100 works in a variety of genres, including large-scale orchestral works that were performed by major orchestras. She wrote many of her most substantial orchestral works in the 1970s, around the bicentennial of the United States, as there was an increasing interest in performance of music by American composers.
The interesting thing about Marga is that she drew upon lots of different sources. So she has works that are distinctly American, like her Country Auction for Band or her Blackberry Vines and Winter Fruit, which was inspired by Henry David Thoreau. She has sources that are either Irish or English. She did the opera Riders to the Sea, which was based on John Synge's play, Riders to the Sea. She also was inspired by Thomas Hardy's Tess of the D'Urbervilles. One of her orchestral works is Spectral Chimes and Enshrouded Hills, and that's based on Thomas Hardy's work. And then she has a whole collection of works that are inspired by Asian sources, and that's what I've been most interested in recently. She read a lot of poetry. She read Emily Dickinson, she read literature, and then she came across these sets of poems when she was a student. And so she said she doesn't really remember where she came across them, but she was often getting, suggestions from friends, and they would say, "Oh, take a look at this poem." And I think what she was drawn to was they often depicted nature. They would have simple language about nature, about the beauty in nature. I think she felt they had some sort of a spiritual quality behind them. I think for her, like, music was her religion. So by capturing sort of these nature images in music, that was her way of sort of finding beauty in the world. And she comes back to Chinese texts then again after she graduated in 1952. She wrote, she set 2 Chinese poems, and the first one's called The Hermit. So she liked that idea of the simple life and being out in nature. So she captured the text there where the hermit talks about being like a wedge of ice in a cup that's slowly melting. And then the second poem was The Fishing Picture. And it's that simplicity of nature and humans interacting with it in a natural way I think she was drawn to. So it was just an image of the fishermen at night as dusk approached. So she's sort of gentle accompaniments to those things. And I think her music's very easy to hear because it's gentle on the ear. Even though there's dissonances in it, she uses softness and easy phrasing to get a nice feel to it.
A cold rain blurs the edges of the river. Night enters womb. fishermen draw their nets from the great pool of the Don River.
More recently, Marga wrote Dewdrops on a Lotus Leaf. And this is quite a lengthy work. It's about 45 minutes. It's a song cycle of 39 songs. So the title comes from an English language biography of the monk, where in the biography they took about, maybe 1,000 poems of Ryokan. And then Marga went through and chose 39 of them. And some of them are quite short, just 2 lines, and then other ones are much more extensive. So she put them into 7 sections. And any of the sections could be performed as a unit by itself on a concert. So if somebody doesn't want to do the entire song cycle, they could do just the opening. And it has been performed with just, I know a singer, Marissa Marivelle, sang just the prologue of 10 songs. So there's a prologue, and then she set them according to the season that they're depicting. So it goes through spring, summer, autumn, winter, and then back to spring again. So there's like renewal or rebirth, the cycle of life. And then at the end, there's a prologue at the end.
Thou standeth there, O tree so lone and sad, among the fields, yet none there is to solace thee, as thou dost bear the stings of life.
I'd like to talk to you a little bit about Conry. This was a work that she wrote after traveling to Tibet with her husband. So she went to Tibet in 1986, and she heard a monk chanting. And again, so she was drawn to some of the religious figures. And she just thought it was a beautiful melody, and she immediately wanted to notate it and copy it down, and thought, well, she could use it as source material. So she notated the melody in F minor, and then she proceeded to write a whole series of variations on it for cello and piano. And that work has been performed by David Wells all over the country. He's traveled with it and has gotten also very good reviews and has come out. One of the things about Marga's music is that it received lots of performances by outstanding performers and musicians. Her piano sonata was played by Menachem Pressler. She had works performed by the Chicago Symphony Orchestra, the London Philharmonic Orchestra, Milwaukee Symphony Orchestra, Atlanta Symphony Orchestra, the Polish National Radio Symphony Orchestra. So she's always had fine performances. She never wanted to think of herself that way as a woman composer. She saw herself in the lines of Bach, Beethoven, Brahms, and Richter, and she wasn't too keen on the idea of separate concerts of music for women composers. Although she did participate in those, I think she felt that it was something necessary to do to get women into the eye of the public and to have their music get reviewed. But she didn't want to be judged any differently, and she shied away from the word feminist. I think she behaved in a way that was feminist, but didn't want any kind of label to be put on her, and didn't want to be put in this category of women, as a woman composer. At the same time, she was a co-founder of the League for Women Composers in the 1970s. And there's correspondence between her and Nancy Van de Waet, who became the director of the League of Women Composers, and Marga was on the board. And so she participated in that, and they put on concerts by women composers, and she supported other fellow women composers. But in terms of her own lifestyle, she was pretty traditional. Now, she did say, when she graduated from Juilliard, there were other male composers that graduated at the same time, and she wondered if she had been male, if she might have gotten a little bit more mentoring.
Richter has expressed pride in her accomplishments and status as a woman, which she considers a critical part of her identity. However, in retrospect, she's wondered whether she would have saved herself trouble by using the ungendered name M. Richter, thus concealing her status as a woman. Richter has noted the persistent bias against women in the field of composition. As she has explained, the very term tells the story. There is no category called men composers. Richter never regretted her role as a mother. Still, despite her family's enthusiastic support for her career, she notes that raising her children took time away from her work. She has also experienced age discrimination, being considered too old for some opportunities after her children were old enough not to require her constant care and supervision. Still, she credits her children and family with increasing her creative energy.
She married, and she had children. She was supported by her husband financially, which gave her a lot of freedom. So she could spend long hours composing, and that was really nice. She taught for a little while, but not much, and she wasn't really keen on being a teacher. She wanted to compose. So it gave her a nice lifestyle, so she was able to compose very freely, and she fully expected her works to be performed by people and to make her living that way. She always wanted to be a mother. In fact, she had some early relationships in her life where she thought her boyfriend wasn't interested in having children, and that was important to her. So she did want to have children, and delighted in raising them, and she felt like they while children can interfere with having time to compose, that she thought that they were more of a plus than a minus, because they brought this added dimension to her life. They created, they helped support her creativity rather than anything else. Her daughter Maureen actually took sitar lessons around the same time she was composing Landscapes of the Mind 1, and her children also talked to her about popular music, and I think she felt that she had a good, easy relationship with them, and they were just musically stimulating more than anything else. So she loved having this combination of having children. And she liked being the primary caregiver. She didn't want to pass that care on to somebody else. So in that sense, she's rather traditional. But I think the independence that she had, the independence of thought, the value that music held for her, it was a strong part of her identity. I don't think she could have thought of herself in any other way than as a composer. Expressing the beauty in nature and the beauty around her, and human relations. I think that was sort of her way of connecting people to the world.